People come up to me all the time and say, Dick, you're one of those physics fellows. You talk about quanta and renormalization and particles popping out of the vacuum. Doesn't that make life feel empty? Doesn't that reduce everything to gears and wires? And sooner or later, usually when the room gets quiet and everyone's run out of small talk, they ask the question everyone carries around like a secret weight. They say, what happens when it's over? What happens when I die? Now, you ask a priest, he's got a script. If you ask a biologist, he'll talk about enzymes and decay. But if you corner a physicist, if you corner me, I've got to tell you something that at first hearing sounds absolutely nuts, outrageous. But nature is outrageous. Nature is far weirder than anything you or I could invent. And the truth is, the question itself is off on the wrong foot. You're laboring under a very sneaky misconception. You think of yourself as an object, a solid thing, a noun like a brick or a spoon. And because you imagine yourself as a thing, you get frightened that the thing might crack or vanish. But you're not a thing at all. You're a process. You're happening. You're a verb with feet. And once you really, honestly get that, once you look closely enough to see the atoms jittering and shimmy inside, the fear of death changes shape. It doesn't disappear entirely, maybe, but it rearranges itself into something closer to wonder. Most folks believe they are the material they're molded from, but that's physically impossible. You're not the substrate, you're the arrangement. Very peculiar, isn't it? To be a pattern instead of the stuff that carries the pattern. But you see examples of this every day. Think of a wave sliding across the surface of the sea. You point to it there, there's a wave. But the water that forms that wave isn't the wave. The water's bobbing up and down. The wave is the shape, the marching arrangement. The water underneath it is swapped out from instant to instant. The wave keeps its identity, even though the water does not. You are exactly that kind of phenomenon. And today I want to talk about that wave, where the atoms come from, why they gang up into this marvelous, delicate choreography called you, and what it means when the choreography winds down. We're going to pry open the machinery of existence and see that while the pattern eventually dissolves, the ingredients that carried it are indestructible. We're going to travel from the jitter of the atom to the sweep of time itself. And along the way, we're going to toss some common sense right out the window, because common sense is usually terrible at understanding the deep rules of the universe. This isn't just physics. This is how reality seems to work when you actually look. If you want to come along for the ride, if you want to see how the world looks when you stop assuming it's what it feels like, well, hit that subscribe button and let's find things out together. Let's start simple. Start at the bottom, stand at the beach, and watch the surf crash. Beautiful, poetic, but if you look more carefully, really carefully, scientifically, you see a teeming crowd of H2O molecules, billions of them smacking into each other, bouncing, wriggling, ricocheting around. Everything is made of atoms. That's the central idea underneath all of physics and all of biology. Little particles in ceaseless motion, tugging gently at each other when they're a bit apart, shoving each other away when they get too close. Look down at your hand. Seems steady, doesn't it? Reliable. The same hand you've had for years. But magnify it a billion-fold, and you'll find a tiny hurricane carbon and oxygen and hydrogen bouncing like children on too much sugar. Here's the part most people never suspect. The atoms in your hand today aren't the ones that were there a few years ago. Your body trades atoms with the world constantly through food, air, water, sweat, breath, carbon in your neurons, calcium in your bones, oxygen in your blood. They're all drifting in and out. So ask yourself, if the atoms have all been replaced, are you still the same person? Materially? Not at all. You're a fresh shipment of atoms. A whole new supply yet. You remember your childhood bedroom. You remember your first bike ride. You laugh the same way. You fear the same fears. So how? How does the memory remain if the hardware has been swapped out? Because you're not the hardware. You're the pattern encoded in the hardware. You're the dance. If you visit a barn dance, the dancers are constantly changing. People switch partners. Some go outside for air. New ones wander in. but the dance, the steps, the movements, the relationships that persist. Death, in this picture, is not the destruction of the atoms. They can't be destroyed, doesn't happen. Not in any experiment yet. Matter and energy shift form, shuffle around, but the total tally stays the same. When you die, no one blows out the atoms. They don't pop like bubbles. Death is when the dance loses its rhythm, when the pattern breaks. Why does it break? Why can't it be patched forever? Here we run into the great spoiler of the universe, entropy. People use entropy like a fancy word for messiness, but in physics, it's exact. It's the count of how many ways a system can arrange itself. Take a deck of cards fresh from the box, perfect order. There's only one way to arrange them in that precise order. One. Now toss the cards in the air or give them a vigorous shuffle. They land in a jumbled mess, not because the universe is allergic to tidiness, but because there are trillions of mixed up arrangements and only one neat one. Order is unlikely. Disorder is overwhelming. Life your L. Iphy is a fleeting triumph over that statistical avalanche. You are a low entropy miracle holding itself together against astronomical odds. Your body fights the natural drift into disorder every second, beating your heart, repairing cells, maintaining that beautiful 98.6 degrees, but the machinery isn't perfect. DNA makes typos, proteins misfold, components wear down. Eventually the probabilities catch up. The pattern loses its coherence. The shuffle wins. When that happens, the atoms scatter. The energy that sustained your particular arrangement dissipates, like a wave collapsing on the shore, foam flying, water spreading, the shape vanishes. But the water remains. Some people hear that and think, so what? I'm just a temporary configuration that gets mixed back into the cosmic soup? Yes, but hang on, because we haven't talked about time yet. We experience time as a river. Past gone, future non-existent. Only the now is real. But the equations, Einstein's especially, don't show a flowing river. They show a kind of loaf, space-time. The whole spread of events exists together, like slices in a long cosmic sausage. You can only observe one slice at a time. Your brain is built that way, but the other slices don't evaporate. The past still exists back there. The future exists up ahead. This isn't mystical. It's the simplest interpretation of relativity. So what is death in a block universe? It's a boundary, a coordinate. Your whole life, birth to death, is a permanent structure etched into the geometry of space-time. That baby version of you is eternally back there. The older version is eternally up ahead. Nothing erases those moments. They're part of the universe's architecture, but let's look again at the atoms themselves, because they have a marvelous biography. The carbon in your fingertip was forged in the core of an ancient star, a star that lived and died long before our sun was born. Heavy elements, everything, worth building a brain out of come from stars blowing themselves to pieces. Supernovae. Your atoms are stardust squared. Recycled star matter that has been planets, comets, oceans, bacteria, dinosaurs. When I look at you, I see the debris of dead suns temporarily organized into something that can laugh and argue and wonder. When you die, the atoms loosen from the pattern and go back into circulation, into soil, into air, into the roots of a dandelion, or the blood of a squirrel, or the lungs of a child not yet born, and every breath you inhale right now contains atoms exhaled by Aristotle, by Cleopatra, by Einstein, by 1,000 forgotten hunter-gatherers. We're all tangled together in this cosmic recycling scheme. Energy does the same thing. Your life is a little burst of order, a clap of hands in the grand echoing hall of the universe. When the clap ends, the sound spreads out as heat. Not gone, just redistributed. So why the fear? Because evolution handed us a trick. The illusion of a separate I. That must be protected. If that illusion weren't convincing, none of us would survive long enough to reproduce. But physics whispers that the separateness is just bookkeeping. The boundaries blur everywhere. Matter, information, always flowing, always merging, always swapping places. You're not an alien visitor in the cosmos. You're not some orphan consciousness stuck in a lonely corner. You are what the universe is doing at one location in space-time. And when the universe does something else with those atoms, it's still you in the deeper sense, the cosmic you, the elemental you, the you made of starlight and fields, and the hum of quantum vacuums. If nothing ended, nothing new could begin. If atoms never moved on, they never get to become the next planet, the next oak tree, the next curious kid staring up at the night sky, asking how it all works. Death is the fee we pay for the privilege of life, an absolute bargain when you think about what we get in return. A song without an ending isn't a song. A life without a boundary wouldn't be a life. The finiteness is the feature. So the next time you worry about the end, don't conjure a blank nothingness. Picture instead the graceful dispersal of a dandelion puff in the breeze. Picture a wave slipping back into the ocean. Picture your atoms hurrying off to their next cosmic assignment. You have had your moment as a self-reflecting piece of the universe. That moment is carved forever into space-time. And the components that carve, ID you, they're indestructible. They have new work to do, new worlds to build. Nature is fierce, bewildering, unsentimental, but astonishingly beautiful in how faithfully it conserves every scrap. Nothing is thrown away. Everything transforms. And to me, that's a far more comforting story than anything in the fairy tale isle. If this way of seeing things, this peeling back of the universe's layers to look at the real machinery underneath speaks to you, then you're in the right place. Share this with someone who needs it, someone who's forgotten they're made of stars. And come along next time, because the universe is enormous and we've barely begun to explore it. People ask me sometimes, usually, when I've just finished explaining something that already sounds completely ridiculous by everyday standards, Dick, how do you live with this picture of the world? You talk about things not really being things, about electrons behaving like probability smears, about space bending under the weight of matter. Doesn't that make the world feel flimsy? Does it take the warmth out of life? Does it make everything sort of mechanical and bleak? And then, after they circle around it like someone afraid to touch a hot stove, they ask the real question, the one we all think about at 2 a.m. when the house is quiet and we realize for a moment that we're temporary. They ask, what happens when I die? Now, if you ask a theologian, he'll quote you a passage. If you ask a biologist, she'll describe the breakdown of cells. But if you ask a physicist, if you ask me, I have to give you an answer that sounds completely bananas at first, but the universe is bananas. It has never once felt the need to behave sensibly. The truth is, the question, what happens when I die, is already tangled up in bad assumptions. It sneaks in a picture of the self that doesn't match how nature actually behaves. We grow up thinking of ourselves as things, solid entities, objects with borders, like apples or coffee cups, something you can point to, something with an outline. But you're not a thing, you're a process. You're a whirlpool in the river of matter. You're a pattern that persists even though the ingredients never stop moving. You are not a noun, you are a verb. And that single realization flips the fear of death inside out, the illusion of the solid self. Look at your body. Seems pretty stable, right? The same arms, same legs, same face you've been dragging around since high school. But that's just the crude everyday scale. When we zoom in, when we use the universe's own measuring sticks, it becomes obvious that the self is a shimmering mirage. Take the atoms in your hand. Not one of them was there a decade ago. Not one. You breathe them in, eat them, drink them, you shed them, sweat them, exhale them. The body is a bustling marketplace of matter atoms darting in and out like customers in a train station, yet somehow, despite the constant churn of material, the pattern continues. You still have memories from childhood. You may not remember where you put your keys yesterday, but you remember the walk to your first school. How is that possible? How can the architecture remain when every brick is swapped out? Because you are not the bricks. You're the blueprint, you're the choreography. If you've ever watched a fire dance in a fireplace, you understand this. The flames flick and twist in recognizable shapes, but the gas molecules making them up are different from moment to moment. The flame is not the stuff, it's the behavior of the stuff. You are that kind of flame. The self as a temporary triumph of order to stay alive. To sustain this intricate dance, we have to continually borrow order from the environment. We eat food, which is basically compressed low entropy packets. We absorb sunlight through the plants we eat. We consume neatness and exhale chaos. That's not poetry, that's thermodynamics. Life is the constant maintenance of improbable order. Don't think of entropy as mess. Think of it as how many ways something can be. A tidy room has very few possible arrangements. A messy room has millions. The universe, left to its own devices, prefers the arrangement with the highest number of possibilities. Life, your life, is a heroic resistance to that tidal drift. You are a local reversal of probability, a little bubble of coherence, a sea that prefers randomness, and maintaining this coherence requires work. Energy, time, machinery. Eventually the machinery wears down, not catastrophically, just gradually, persistently. DNA accumulates errors. Proteins lose their shape. Cells get sloppy. Entropy presents the bill. When we die, we don't disappear. The atoms don't vanish. The energy doesn't evaporate. The pattern simply stops holding, a whirlpool that slows until the water forgets its swirl. A flame that sighs into its final shape and lets the heat wander off into the air. The pieces remain. The orchestra disperses. The music ends. But the ending of the song does not mean the instruments cease to exist. You have never been separate from the universe. We tend to imagine ourselves as little pilots sitting in our skulls, separate from the world, looking out through the windows of our eyes. That's biology's trick. Keep the organism convinced it's a solid, independent unit, so it will protect itself. But physics laughs at the idea of separateness. You are continuous with the universe. You are made of the same fields, same atoms, the same quanta as stars and oceans and pigeons and dark matter. The boundary of your skin is a convenient line for a doctor, but not for nature. You're more like a wave on the ocean, clearly distinguishable, yet inseparable from the water that creates you. Think of breathing. You inhale a lungful of air. For a few seconds, those oxygen molecules are you. Then they're not. They float away to become part of a tree, a cat, a thundercloud, or the nostril of someone arguing about politics in Cincinnati. The atoms in your brain right now, right this instant, have been inside the lungs of people long dead, perhaps. People whose names history has forgotten. We are a swirling, gorgeous mix of one another. It's impossible to die without giving your atoms back to the rest of us. The biography of your atoms. Let me tell you something about the atoms in your body. Every carbon atom in your flesh was cooked in the heart of a star, and not just any star, a star that lived and died before the sun was born. When that star exploded, it flung its enriched guts across the galaxy. Those guts cooled into dust clouds. Those clouds clumped into planets. One of those nets happened to develop water, chemistry, metabolism, curiosity, and mortgages. You are made of the ruins of ancient suns. Greek philosophers used to say fire was a pure element, the essence of vitality. They weren't entirely wrong. The fire they imagined, the fire of the stars, is literally in you, not poetically, factually. Atoms with violent, explosive histories are inside your bones and your thoughts. Some of the iron in your blood came from a supernova so massive it collapsed into a neutron star. You carry the night sky inside you. So when the pattern dissolves, when the dance ends, those atoms don't retire. They don't get bored and fall asleep. They rush off to join new patterns. A maple tree, a dragonfly's wing, the luminous heart of a new star. Death is recycling, not erasure. Time, the grandest trick of all. But the biggest surprise isn't the atoms. It's the time dimension. We think the past is gone. We think the future doesn't exist yet. We think the present is sliding forward like a spotlight crawling along a corridor. Once Einstein came along and rearranged our understanding of the cosmic stage, that picture started to fall apart. Time is not a river. It's a landscape. A four-dimensional terrain. Your birth is a location. Your death is a location. The moment you first said, your name is a location. They all exist in the block of space-time, just as the Grand Canyon, the Pacific Ocean, and your kitchen all exist on the map of Earth. You can't visit your birth again. Because your consciousness travels along a particular path, not because the moment itself disappeared. Nothing in your life vanishes from the structure of space-time. It simply sits there, an eternal segment of your world line. So what is death? A boundary, a coordinate, a place where your world line ends its biological wriggle. But that entire wriggle from first breath to last is preserved in the universe's geometry. Every laugh, every tear, every argument you lost because you couldn't think of. A good comeback until an hour later. It's all etched into the cosmic record. Your life is a permanent part of the universe's architecture. The vacuum is not empty, and neither are you. People hear vacuum and think nothing, but the vacuum of quantum field theory is about as empty as Times Square on New Year's Eve. It's a churning sea of fluctuations, particles winking in and out, fields vibrating. You are not made of particles. You are made of excitations of fields. You're a splash. The quantum ocean, a temporary standing wave, a little pocket of organized motion. When the wave quiets, the ocean remains. When the vibration stills, the field remains. Energy doesn't fade, it redistributes. Patterns dissolve. Ingredients persist. Silence after a sound is not a void, it's just the energy spread thin. Your life is a resonant pulse in the grand cosmic field. When the pulse ends, the field goes on humming beneath everything. Why we fear the end. So if that's the nature of things, if D is just the end of a pattern, not the end of matter, why do we fear it so much? Because evolution wired us to. The little voice inside your head, the narrator, the warrior, the commentator was built to keep the pattern alive long enough to reproduce. It's a survival gadget, not a cosmic truth teller. The ego screams for permanence because that's its job. The cosmos, meanwhile, shrugs and keeps recycling atoms. When you realize the ego is a tool, not your identity, the fear softens, not vanishes entirely. We're still human, but transforms into a kind of awe. You start to see that you've never been alone. You've never been separate. You've always been the universe in motion, momentarily shaped into a form that can ask questions about itself. The universe looks at itself through you. I like to imagine that consciousness, ours, the birds, the whales, whoever's is the universe, developing a sense of curiosity about its own workings. It's as if, after billions of years of stars fusing and exploding and